So first of all, good morning to all our European friends and good evening to our Australian colleagues, and welcome to this first panel session on research infrastructure landscapes. We have 3 panel members and each one will give a 15-minute presentation and will allow 1 question after the presentation, and then we'll move into the discussion. And it's my pleasure to introduce my Australian colleague, Bernadette Kelly, who's a Director of the National Research Infrastructures Policy for the Australian Government Department of Education. So, Bernadette, we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Ian, and good evening and good morning, everybody. I am just going to share my screen and see if this works. Okay, I hope that's working for everybody. So yeah, thanks, Ian. I'm Bernadette Kelly. I have the responsibility this year of driving the 2021 National Research Infrastructure Roadmap with a team here in the Department of Education, Skills and Employment, and with an expert working group at the helm. And Dr. Foley, who spoke earlier, is one of our expert working group members, and it's great to have her on board. It certainly is an exciting time for science, and it's a really important time for us to be undertaking Australia's next research infrastructure roadmap is in light of all the dramatic changes we've seen since COVID. The Australian government supports research and innovation through significant funding from 2017-18 through to 28-29. It's made a $4 billion commitment to invest in national research infrastructure. The 2021 roadmap provides an opportunity to shape the direction of funding priorities from 2023-24 out to 28-29. NRI is a key part of the Australian research ecosystem with benefits beyond direct research excellence. And Kathy has touched on a lot of these social and economic benefits in her speech earlier today. Now, this slide shows our current NRI capabilities, and we've used a categorisation under these broad themes, which are very similar to some of our international colleagues in terms of the UK and ESFRI in Europe have used these types of categories to explain and categorise the research infrastructure. Our suite of infrastructures, include equipment to identify potential new therapeutic drugs and accelerate their progress into clinical trials, observing systems for biosecurity, minerals and resources and the environment, fabrication and characterization for advances in material science, digital research infrastructure such as supercomputers, national research clouds and platforms for researchers. We provide access to technologies in support of all life science research, including working across human health, agriculture, biodiversity and industry. These capabilities, as you can see, are delivered through network facilities, both distributed and single-sided, using cutting-edge technology, supported by skilled workforce and technical experts, and enabled by data acquisition, data management and analysis tools, modelling, visualisation and software services. You would have seen a number of these statistics in the workshop, in the Symposium white paper, but it's very important for the Australian government to understand the impact of its investment in research infrastructure. And we can see that we leverage apparently $1.40 for every dollar of Australian government spend. Our researcher users are mapped in terms of our domestic and international users. We look at our top fields of research, as well as our top industries that use our NCRES facilities. And then we gauge success to a degree through publications and the impact in patents in terms of the commercialisation of products. In Australia, every 5 years, the government undertakes a roadmap process to identify Australia's research infrastructure capability and future areas of need. And then every 2 years, it releases a research infrastructure investment plan to support the roadmap and ensure investment reflects research and needs. So as you can see, from the 2016 roadmap, in between the two roadmaps, we've done 2 investment plans, and now we're setting a new direction for ahead of our 2022 investment plan. As I said before, an expert working group is overseeing the roadmap process, and there are just some really key questions that we need to answer in this process. We're first looking at what is the scope and breadth of Australia's current NRI capability, so in terms of bringing our expert working group up to speed with the breadth and scope of it. And then we're going to be looking at what are the emerging research trends and research infrastructure needs. And following that, then we'll be looking at, well, what new and enhanced NRI capabilities does Australia need to prioritise? Ahead of, commencing the roadmap process, we did quite a bit of an analysis of international trends and domestic trends, and we saw that there was an emerging technology such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotics, and IoT is changing how research is conducted and what is possible. There's an unabating exponential growth in data and compute needs. There are changing research practices such as open science, a large focus on multidisciplinary research, mission-driven research, and transdisciplinary practice. And we also looked at industry engagement also. So really, none of these trends are probably of any surprise to the audience today in terms of, a push for better collaboration, the impact of open science agendas on our digital infrastructure needs, the increased compute and data needs, and the need for Australia to maintain its interoperability with international collaborations. A very big theme, though, coming through most of the early discussions and in the continued discussions in the roadmap has been the need for expertise and to maintain expertise and to acquire expertise that accompanies the infrastructure investment, and to also develop and ensure career pathways for our infrastructure staff. Australia doesn't do well when it comes to engagement with industry, and so it is definitely one of the focuses of the roadmap, and we have had a number of consultations in respect to industry needs. We can just see, obviously, like Kathy was speaking about, quantum is having potential big impact on research into the future. And an early theme coming through was the need for predictive capabilities and modelling infrastructure. So through the roadmap process, we're going to be, we have undertaken and are still undertaking a number of consultations, the majority of which are all online, given that half of the Australian population is in lockdown at the moment. And we were lucky enough to have our first meeting of the expert working group in person, and that was in May, and that was the last time anybody met in person. So we've done all of our work with our expert working group online, and we've done all the consultations online, and so it's been quite a big undertaking. And then we've had some quite bespoke consultations on particular issues. Our digital research infrastructure issues was a very big issue for us. So we divided that into a few workshops. It was really trying to work out what is the national research infrastructure need in this in this space is quite challenging, given the pervasiveness of data and compute needs across the research sector. We undertook early in the process a survey, and we got 3,000 survey respondents across Australia, in terms of really trying to understand their use and needs from the researcher's perspective. It was really important to have a bottom-up approach as well as a top-down approach to this roadmap, and it was really interesting to see the responses that we got. We could see that researchers are using the NRI for research resources and products, for equipment, for expertise and advice for the collection, for the data that they collected from their own research, and then help with managing, curating and archiving and analysing the data as well. We have engaged the Australian Academy of Science to undertake a number of papers for us, and one of them was on emerging research areas. It was really important for us to not just understand what our researcher needs are, but what are the emerging technologies and science areas that are coming down the pipeline. So really, as Kathy suggested, AI assisted research is a big one, and then we've got next generation climate modelling, the synthetic biology, Earth observation, renewable energy systems, and next generation material sciences. I don't think any of this will be much of a surprise for any of the audience as well. And this is very similar to trends across the globe also. Yeah. So just in conclusion, one of the challenges for our expert working group and for the Secretariat is to work through the framing of the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap for 2021. This is, we're seeing a lot of a lot of issues in regards to the horizontal nature of capabilities, and to try and break down the silos of previous roadmaps. In 2016, we used 9 focus areas to present research infrastructure needs. And in the 2008 and 2011 roadmaps, there was a bit of a mix of research themes, missions, and outcome-focused capability areas. Earlier international roadmaps have also used a similar segmentation of domains. But as we can see, the environment around NRI is changing rapidly. Research is more collaborative, digital, and data intensive. NRI facilities and services are multidisciplinary and don't fit neatly into one focus area. Stakeholders identified in this process early that there was an opportunity to rethink the traditional segmentation of NRI. Greater clustering of NRI and increasing horizontal linkages is anticipated in some of in the upcoming international roadmaps. Domestically, we see road mapping and strategic planning being done through the lens of challenges and emerging technologies. Some examples of that are the Australian Government's Modern Manufacturing Strategy, the CSIRO's planning, National Marine Science Council, and the astronomy community. So, and we also can see that we've got a mature NRI network that is ready to support other sectors such as industry to advance innovation and to take support for research to new levels. So given these things, given these perspectives and understandings, how do we then approach the roadmap? We could look at it through a number of lenses, or maybe all lenses, and we could ensure that NRI capabilities support national priorities and missions or global challenges. And we can see from a lot of the work that we've done that our current suite of NRI does in fact support a lot of national priorities and missions. And we anticipate that would be continuing going forward. We could elevate the focus and discussion on enabling NRI capabilities, like our underpinnings, and to focus on those, the big issues of data management, the human capital, imaging, observation, data tools and analysis that cut across multiple domains to support collaborative research. We can also look to cluster our NRI capabilities to increase these horizontal linkages and opportunities to provide researchers with a seamless ecosystem of research infrastructure, services and facilities. So that is the end of my discussion. So I assume we have questions later. Ian? Or I could take questions now.
We're allowed one question, Bernadette, and I might fire that question because it's for a fairly quick answer. I think we all see the benefits and the value of having greater collaboration between Europe and Australia, and that'll be the theme, obviously, of this meeting. I just wondered from a government perspective, what do you think we can do to maximise the impact of these collaborations, and what would you or the government see as the real critical components?
Well, increasing impact, I guess, yeah, increasing access and awareness. Like, we are seeing the issues of awareness of our NRI as an issue in the roadmap. So I think awareness, raising awareness of the extent of the collaborations and the impact of those. You know, even looking at the white paper for the symposium, you can see there's incredible work going on across both Australia and Europe and together, and that there is this need to continue to do so. I think the globalization of research, you know, really does drive home the need to support collaboration in particular as well. So it's really, I guess, the opportunity through policy documents like the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap to raise these issues. Like, we can do that, but also in your own documents as well. I think raising awareness at the government level, and there is ongoing discussions between Australia and bilaterally and multilaterally with other countries. So definitely raising it at those sort of meetings is important. You know, we do that quite frequently through our bilateral arrangements at the moment. So I think just taking the opportunity for any engagement that you have with governments to raise and articulate the impact of the research infrastructure and the global research infrastructures, and then the power of the collaboration and what that has driven, also just driving home those key messages.
Thank you so much for both sticking to time and a terrific presentation. Thank you. So we'll come back and perhaps we'll expand this at our discussion after the 3 talks. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ian.
Okay, our next speaker, I say this evening or this morning, is Inmaculada Figueroa, who's the Vice Chair of the European Strategic Forum on Research Infrastructures, the ESFRI, and Deputy Vice Director General of the Internationalization of Science and Innovation in the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation. So thank you so much for agreeing to partake, and we look forward to your talk today.
Hello, I will try to share my screen. Are you seeing that? No.
Not yet.
Not yet? Now?
Yes.
In presentation mode?
Not yet.
Now?
That's it. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting us to be here in this workshop. That it is very important. We have had opportunity to participate in another workshop organized by the project RI-VIS, and we are very happy to be here in this workshop in which we are going to discuss about the collaboration with Australia. I am here on behalf of ESFRI. I think that many of you know about ESFRI, but just for giving you some key messages from ESFRI. It was created in 2002 with a mandate of the European Union Council, and with the intention to support the coherent strategy to policy making in relation with the research infrastructures in Europe. And with the intention to facilitate multilateral collaborations, initiatives, in order to create a better research infrastructure in Europe. ESFRI is composed by representatives of the 27th member states and associated countries to the European Union and the European Commission. And the purpose is just to advise on the strategies to be followed in order to have a strong ecosystem of research infrastructures in Europe. The main tool that we have in ESFRI to do this exercise is the roadmap. The roadmap tries to identify the new pan-European research infrastructure or major upgrades of the existing research infrastructures that are needed in Europe for the production of this excellent science with a temporal scenario of 10 to 20 years. Also, the roadmap includes the landmarks, that is the landmarks that are those infrastructures that are already implemented, understanding for implemented that they are leaders in their scientific domain and offering services to the research community. Since 2002, when the ESFRI was created, we have had 6 roadmaps from 2006 till today, 2021, in which we are concluding the roadmap that will be presented in December in a conference in Ljubljana. And we have tried to modify the way we produce the roadmap, adapting to the needs of Europe in each period. The instruments for reproduction of the work of ESFRI are mainly the strategy working groups, the implementation group, and ad hoc expert working groups. So the human capital is really necessary in order to produce these roadmaps. These groups are composed by research and innovation experts in each scientific domain, experts on electronic infrastructures, experts in management, risk analysis, and human capital management in research infrastructures, and the evaluation covers different aspects that goes from the user access strategies to the setting of these infrastructures, governance, financing, all the different aspects. All the groups are always shared by members of the forum or permanent experts of the forum. For doing the evaluation, ESFRI counts with a strong and well-established procedures, and we have defined minimal key requirements that are considered in order to take into consideration the evaluation in the different stages of the life cycle. The life cycle is covering all the different stages of the research infrastructure, from the concept development till the termination. And for each of these different stages, ESFRI has defined minimal key requirements that are needed to fulfill or to comply in order to be successful in the evaluation of this stage. As I mentioned, we are concluding now the roadmap 2021 that will be announced in the ESFRI days in Ljubljana, from the 6th till the 8th of December this year. And the result of the process, I have used some color that is not possible to read here. We received 18 proposals. From these 18 proposals, after the evaluation of them in both aspects, scientific aspect and implementation aspect, the conclusion is that 11 proposals has been considered high in scientific domain and high in the implementation aspect, and are proposed to be included in the roadmap. I will try to improve my slide in order you can read them, because there are some names that is not possible to read. Another important element that we consider inside the roadmap is the landscape analysis. The landscape analysis tries to gather the infrastructures that are in Europe beyond the ESFRI research infrastructure, and that contribute also to the building of this ecosystem of research infrastructure in Europe. The landscape analysis is a reference document. In no case implies any prioritization or any commitment from the countries, but it is a tool that we plan to improve in the next period in order to have a more strategic tool for the definition of these gaps that exist and in which we have to work for having them covered. Together with the road mapping exercise, ESFRI has been in the last years involved in a deep analysis of what should be the role of infrastructures in the new era. And as such, we concluded with the publication of the ESFRI white paper 2020, in which ESFRI present what is the policy vision in relation to the research infrastructure for the new years, and how the research infrastructure needs to be involved in the new era. The white paper was presented in the conference European Research Infrastructure for a Smarter Future, in a conference organized by the Presidency of the Council, the Croatian Presidency of the Council in 2020. The purpose of the roadmap is just to show how research infrastructure can contribute to the era as a main player of ERA. Fruit of this discussion, we define a new ESFRI vision that is equipping Europe with infrastructure for groundbreaking research. Among the mission, the different actions that are included within the white paper, it is underlined that ESFRI needs to facilitate international research cooperation and strengthen European research in a global perspective. Here you have the main messages. The main messages is that the research infrastructure are essential pillars or elements for the construction of the European research era, for the construction and for building the European research era. Research infrastructure are a strategic investment. This is clear. Research infrastructure are knowledge of and innovation hubs. Research infrastructure are tools for establishing the coherence at the European national and regional priorities. And infrastructure are major promoters of open science research. And ESFRI is contributing through the different actions to the research infrastructure policies in Europe. Also, in the new era communication, it acknowledged the work that ESFRI has been done during these 20 years of ERA, and it is and the 55 European research infrastructure that have been constructed or planned to construct during this period. From these 55 European research infrastructure, 37 are implemented, and 18 are in the process to be in preparation phase. Among the actions that the Commission communication established, the 10th action is related with the support to the creation of world-class research infrastructure and establish an updated governance structure for research and technological infrastructure. So it is recognized in the communication. Research infrastructure has played also an important role during this pandemic crisis. Research infrastructure has become very prominent in the fight against COVID-19, and this is based mainly in three characteristics. That is the readiness. They were fast and targeted to respond to the crisis from the beginning. They have had the opportunity to be interoperable, and they have been working together, different infrastructure, in order to sharing resources and data immediately to tackle the problems of the crisis. And they have proved that they did impact in what was needed for this COVID. In the research on diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines. So it is something that it's very important to recognize the role of research infrastructures in response to the crisis. Well, there are a series of 4 minutes.
4 minutes to go.
Okay. So here I am not going through them. These are the points that for the different aspects need to be reinforced in this new period, and specifically in the global dimension. It is needed this alignment of the European investment priorities in research infrastructures with the key international partners to support this cutting-edge science and address global challenges. This is something that it is recognized, and it is important to take into consideration in this contest. Well, there is an action to promote and to support ESFRI work for the next period. I want to mention also that in order to offer legal structure to this research infrastructure for the implementation of research infrastructure, the Commission, the European Union, established a special regulation, that is the European Research Infrastructure Consortium, that is the legal structure in order the research infrastructure can act in the market and can be implemented. The legal entity is created under the union law. The characteristics is that an ERIC needs to have at least one member state and 2 other countries that are either member state or associated countries as members. There are the possibility for among the members to have third countries. This is something that is open. So the third countries can be part as member of the research infrastructure of the ERIC regulation, of the ERIC European Research Infrastructure Consortium. The purpose of the regulation is to have to establish or to implement this research infrastructure without the need to go to the international agreements that are long in the process to be implemented, and in order to give flexibility for the implementation of this research infrastructure. There is some requirement is that the applicable law is the union law, and the law of the state for this aspect that are not regulated in the union law, and for sure for the
1
status.
minute.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to, well, okay. So I would like, if afterwards we have a question, I will go through this because I think it's important. In relation to the collaboration, the ESFRI collaboration with Australia, the only research infrastructure, European research infrastructure in which Australia is member is the SKO, the Square Kilometre Array Observatory, in which Australia is one of the members of the International Convention, and not only a member, but is also one side of the infrastructure. Australia is hosting the Low Observatory in the Murchison Radio Astronomy Observatory. There is another research infrastructure in which Australia is becoming part since the origin of the infrastructure, like the Cherenkov Telescope Array, where Australia is participating. Cherenkov Telescope Array is in the process to become an ERIC, and Australia will be part, but not by now, not by like member through the government, but as by means of a specific agreement in which the Australia Limited Company is going to be part is going to sign an agreement with ERIC. So Australia is going to be part, is going to contribute, is going to have access, is going to be to contribute to the contribution and to the development of the observatory, but not as member, but through special agreements. This is the case for many others in which Australia is collaborating with our research infrastructure, but through specific agreements, memorandum of understanding for specific actions. And it's something that we have to identify how we can work together in order to improve it. And nothing else. Thank you. Sorry. No,
that was a great presentation and very comprehensive. And I'm glad that you went through those final slides, which highlight the collaborations between Australia and ESFRI. I think because we want to spend as much time as we can with the panel discussion, we might just go straight on to the final panel speaker, who is Dominik Sobczak, who is Deputy Head of the Unit, Actors and Research Careers, Director General Research and Innovation, European Commission, Research Policy Officer on Research Infrastructure, and Executive Secretary of the European Strategic Forum on Research Infrastructures, ESFRI. So Dominik, over to you, please.
Thank you, Jan. Good evening to the colleagues in Australia. Good morning to those in Europe. Now let me check the challenge of sharing the screen. Normally it should work. So you should see it now in the presentation mode. If you could see and confirm, that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Wonderful. So thank you very much for invitation to this really important seminar and to be able to speak here in the great company of Bernadette and Inma. This session is about the landscape of research infrastructure, and I think that that kind of events in general are really important right now, especially because most of the challenges. Sorry if you hear a dog barking, that's my dog, and someone is entering the house. It will stop in a second, hopefully. Anyway, I was saying that the challenges that we face now globally, everywhere, are of such nature that we need scientific collaboration, not only across individual countries inside individual continents, but also across the globe. And research infrastructures are one of the key vehicles actually to make that research collaboration possible. So as discussing the landscape of European research infrastructures would actually be quite tedious and time consuming, I think that as a teaser, what I would like to share with you today is some helicopter view on the evolution of that landscape and how we got where we are, then give you some indications of potential opportunities where we could collaborate further between the European research infrastructures and the Australian one. And I think that here the Australian roadmap, which will be coming out soon, that Bernadette was mentioning, and the fact that in Europe, as Inma mentioned, we are working right now, finalizing the work on then yet another edition of the European roadmap, which will be out later this year. I think it offers also a great opportunity. So when we go back 20 years to the beginning of this century, the European landscape of RIs looked basically like that. We had national research infrastructures of various types, national labs, different types of facilities, databases, collections, etc. And then we had few international organizations that were some of them global, some of them European. You know them very well, like CERN, European Southern Observatory, or European Molecular Biology Laboratory. Overall, this landscape was fragmented and uncoordinated at the European level, at least. And we're speaking of the situation in which we already had 15 countries, members of the European Union, and within the following 5 years, we have admitted, or 7 years, we have admitted another 12 countries. So in the year 2000, the break of the century, the EU level, and here I'm not speaking only about the Commission because research policy is actually shared very much and co-designed, co-developed very much between the Commission and the different countries. We have developed a vision to create a European research area, to create a space that would be an interconnected space without barriers, where research could be done together at the European level. Of course, that would be underpinned also by European funding for research innovation, which dated from 15 years back, but we wanted to reinforce that a lot. Now, at that time, we also realized, knowing that research infrastructures are an essential component of research excellence and research competitiveness, we have also realized that the same applies to research infrastructures, that we need to develop functioning and interconnected system of research infrastructures in Europe that would overcome the fragmentation that we have been seeing. So the first objective of the European research infrastructure policy was actually to pool resources. Research infrastructures become more and more complex, demanding to establish, and also more costly. And many of the European countries are actually quite small. So only very few of them could be able to develop a research infrastructure that would be globally an important player and at the cutting edge of science. So we wanted to pool these resources of the different countries, human resources, financial resources, to build things together. Second of all, the national research infrastructures were usually closed. So you had national users or regional users from the different institutions, and that was it. The idea was that we, with the EU that is expanding, with so many countries in, we have many places in Europe where researchers cannot really access these research infrastructures, so cannot do their science at the best possible world level because they don't have the possibility to use the services in top facilities. We wanted to overcome that with the European research area and open access to those research infrastructures to the broad research community in Europe. Thirdly, there was an issue of coordinating and rationalizing the development and use of research infrastructures. Because of course, with so many countries around, you risk duplication. And like this, we would be able to have more strategic steering of the development of research infrastructures and overcome the fragmentation of the landscape. Connecting research communities was also important. So not only building together the facilities themselves, but also connecting research communities better. Also exchange of practice between the different facilities and labs to develop interoperability, to strengthen connections, and also to strengthen the human resources capacity. Now, when we look at the European landscape right now, we have three main actors. We have the member states, associated countries, and also third countries, where you set national priorities, where there is the bulk of funding. Over 90% of all the funding is done at the level of member states, the level of individual countries, and you also have the scientific communities. Now, Ima said a lot about ESRI. We have ESRI. It was established in 2002. So next year it will be 20 years old. And this is our vehicle for developing a common European RI policy, for identifying the priorities that we would jointly like to invest in, incubating the RIs that we need. Someone came in, but I think he muted. And also coordinate national priorities. We do this through the ESRI roadmap, but also through different types of analytical work that we do at ESRI on research infrastructure policy itself. So with ESRI, we created a platform where countries could actually discuss their priorities and could discuss their needs. We have the European Commission. Before going to the European Commission, in ESRI, we actually have quite a unique environment, because what we created and why ESRI has become so successful with the roadmap and with its role in establishing the landscape that we have right now in Europe, was that we brought together the scientific community, where science is done and the scientific priorities are known and where users are, the countries where bulk of the funding is available, and also the European Commission to help support this from the European perspective with an overarching policy kind of guidance and context, but also with dedicated funding to those areas of research infrastructure development where national money might not be available. So the Commission, as I said, supports the European RI policies more broadly. It also funds in the different moments of a research infrastructure life cycle, provides also dedicated funding, targeted funding for preparatory phases, implementation, and also importantly, a lot of funds are available from regional development and cohesion policy to actually build facilities. So where did we end up 20 years later, or 21 years later to be more precise? We have managed to develop a relatively well interconnected and very rich, certainly, European landscape of research infrastructure that is right now composed of pan-European research infrastructures, and then through the ESRI roadmap as an incubator, we've incubated already, including the 2021 update, that is already, decisions are taken, but it will be formally published later this year. We have altogether 62 research infrastructures there on the roadmap, pan-European ones, meaning that there are a number of countries that are members of these research infrastructures and pull in investment and other resources to do things jointly. 41 have already been implemented or are under advanced construction, and 21 are projects that are in the making, that are in their preparatory phase. It covers 6 broad thematic areas, so we cover most fields of science. There are single-sided and distributed infrastructures, which means that on the one hand, we actually pool resources to build large facilities in one place, in one country, where the members agree where it would be located, like the European Spallation Source in Sweden, just to give one example. And we have distributed research infrastructure, which means that we are putting together the different facilities and resources that are available at national level to create one common research infrastructure. We do this, for example, for biobanks. We do this also, and this is biobanks, this is all already implemented. We have one which is in implementation, which brings together national history musea and the collection of those musea. So this is something, for example, that Katie Foley mentioned in earlier on, the importance of collections. We try to pull them together at European level. Investments that the preparatory phase, and as I mentioned, also implementation is supported by the EU with the framework program budget, so the research funding budget, in complement, of course, to the national funding which is available for that. Also, for the construction itself, European regional development and cohesion funds are also used. Altogether, these research infrastructures have mobilized or will mobilize, because some of that, of course, is not yet available, so the money is not yet put in, over 20 billion euro of investments. It's quite an important amount. And as Inma mentioned, some of these research infrastructures have international membership. And here, SKA is a key question, is a key example of membership of Australia. We have the European Research Infrastructure Consortium, which some details on, which is a legal framework that supports the implementation. We have already 19 ERIC, and international participation is also possible. We have the European RI networks, and through the framework program, to overcome this problem of lack of access to national facilities, we organized thematic networks. We organized over 90 of them, and we supported over 37,000 of researchers only in the Horizon 2020 program, so over the last 7 years, to have access to research infrastructures in a different country. And we, of course, still have national facilities and labs of different sizes, often connected to the European landscape, where there is also growing alignment of priorities at the level of national roadmaps, and we have the international organizations that I mentioned earlier. So this is a snapshot of the landscape right now of pan-European RIs, the 62 that I mentioned, across 6 areas. I will not go into the details. Some of them are actually organizers of the event that we have today. And I think many of them offer tremendous opportunity for international collaboration. Now, right now, we have kicked off the next framework program for research and innovation, Horizon Europe, with over 95 billion euros of funding for 7 years. That's, again, a sizable amount. It's the biggest program in the world, most internationally open. So from anywhere in the world, it's possible to participate. In many cases, also, it is possible to get funding from that program, even if you are not in the EU, for collaboration with EU partners. Research infrastructures to speed up. This is basically a kind of an organization structure of the program in 3 pillars. I will not go into the details of that. In pillar 1 on scientific excellence, we have research infrastructures. So we underline that this is the capacity building that we do for Europe. That's why we are in the excellent science pillar. But of course, the research infrastructures that are already operational offer services for researchers that also get funding from all other parts of the framework programs. So they are often very active partners in, for example, global challenges pillar. The research infrastructure part has a 2.4 billion budget for the 7 years, which is quite substantial again. We have 4 main blocks of the program. One is consolidating development and developing the landscape of European research infrastructure. So that's dedicated to pan-European RIs, incubated through the S3 roadmap. And also we have 2 ERICs that are not on the S3 roadmap. So also we support development of ERICs that would not go through the S3 program. So the special consortia with the special European.
1 minute, Dominik.
Second, I will manage. Thank you. The second pillar is opening, integrating, and interconnecting research infrastructure. So dealing with the access issue that I mentioned, we had something like 90 networks supported in Horizon 2020. Here, what is important, we are trying to move, and this is one of the challenges that we have, I think all have, and they have been mentioned before, we try to move from funding for scientific communities to the funding for access to services that will be targeting certain global challenges that we have. So we try to make here an innovation of putting the different communities together to propose services to users that would be addressing certain concrete challenges, certain concrete issues. And here, this is one area where actually international collaboration of research infrastructures in Europe and outside of Europe is very important, is welcome, and certainly there are funding possibilities here for that kind of collaboration to open up facilities. to international users. The third pillar is the innovation potential of European research infrastructure. So we do recognize that we need to continue innovating, to have the excellent research infrastructure, to be able to do cutting-edge science. So constant innovation in research infrastructure is an important part of the program as well. And the third one is more supporting research infrastructure. The fourth one, sorry, supporting more the research infrastructure policy, where we reinforce this policy. We try to get policy advice and support from that, but also we support international cooperation of European RIs. And there we also expect to have opportunities to provide support to European RIs to reach out to international partners, where I think opportunities for collaboration between EU and Australia will also appear. So for more info, of course, we have all kinds of websites that you're welcome to visit. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for this.
Dominik, thank you. That was another terrific presentation. I'm just thinking, Viridiana, if we get appropriate permission, that we could make all the presentations available. I think there's a huge amount of really terrific information contained within those presentations. That's something perhaps we can look into. I think that would be great. Okay, so we're now opening it up as a panel discussion, and I hope this will be as free-flowing as it can be. And through the chat line, if there's people that want to make comments or ask a question, if they can direct it, and I can ask that question. But I'd like to start off because all three of you come from quite different perspectives. Certainly, I've followed ESFRI with a lot of interest and some involvement over the years, and particularly looked at the Corbell initiative to bring different infrastructures together. And Bernadette, in her presentation, alluded to the possibility that they may consider sort of clustering. Given that we are globally moving towards mission-based research, which is taking multidisciplinary approaches, how can we better, do you think, coordinate collaborations across disciplines as well as within disciplines? And where do we see the value of offering to our research community the one-stop shop where you can access a variety of different, perhaps related capabilities? I might start off, seeing as you finished, Dominik, if you had any thoughts or any views on looking at ways in which we can better integrate across as well as vertically these different disciplines, these different capabilities.
Yes, thank you, Jan. Well, this is of course challenging because in many ways researchers, like many other people, like to work in their own part, in their own field, and are not it's not that easy to go out of the comfort zone. But this is exactly what we are trying to do actually. This is what I mentioned towards the end in one of the 4 pillars that we have in the research infrastructure program for Horizon Europe. We provide right now the access funding to the large extent to challenge-based service provision. So we invite research infrastructures, not from specific areas, scientific areas, but that have services that are relevant for a specific challenge to come together and prepare a common service offer for researchers. And we then provide funding for these researchers to access the services of these research infrastructures. So we try to structure that field through the different services that the research infrastructures have that are relevant for specific challenges. This can be COVID, this can be fighting cancer, this can be different issues related to environmental protection or countering global change, climate change, or energy challenges, etc. So we try to do this from the service approach. At the same time, we try to better consolidate the communities and also the communities of research infrastructures, not only scientific communities, communities of research infrastructures around certain fields. And these are the types of clusters that you mentioned, that we, I think, already now have a 3rd edition. They have been again set up through EU-funded projects to come together and to address common challenges. And that, I think, will give also better capacities to these research infrastructures to respond to the challenges, where within given field, they can become better connected, better understand what they have, and prepare possibly common services or joint actions to address certain challenge. So So we work in these two ways. One is better integration of the individual communities as broad as possible. And the second level is developing service pipeline or service offers across RIs in different fields based on common challenges. Some of that is already ongoing for some time, especially the clustering. The other approach, the more mission-driven approach, as you mentioned, is actually quite new. So we will only see in a few years what kind of results it brought. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dominik. Inmaculada or Bernadette, or any comments to add to that, or any other sort of perspectives?
Only say that we have been working with the clustering possibilities since several years ago, and from the European Commission and the work program on research infrastructure, it has been promote this clustering. Initially, it was a clustering in order to work together in particular for covering the needs that many of these infrastructure have and the way they can work together in order to implement these services in a common way within the scientific domains. Afterwards was in offering these services that was mentioned by Dominik, these improved services, joining what each of these infrastructure are providing as services for giving an added value service for researchers. And it is proven that it's beneficial, especially now with the COVID crisis and what we have been needed for respond to the crisis. So we are in favor of clustering. We are following the clustering projects that are in place, and we consider also that the clustering is the way also to be to work in building the European Open Science Cloud. That is one of our main goals also in Europe, and the way to construct this European Open Science Cloud is through this clustering of research infrastructure. So the clustering is necessary for offering better services. The clustering is needed for being more efficient in the use of resources, and the clustering beyond the limits of the scientific domain is also needed for this scientific and new research that we are trying to produce in Europe.
Thanks. Bernadette.
Oh, thanks, Ian. I'll just say a few quick things. You know, in Australia, our NRI already sort of is clustering in terms of its response to challenges like COVID, but also in terms of climate change, and we do see that we can build on those benefits that have already occurred in our NRI ecosystem. We're really seeing some strong messages from the research and industry users, though, of NRI in this roadmap process of really wanting to see that seamlessness in the ecosystem, so that, you know, they are not needing to know who they're navigating with or what they're, you know, or what arrangement they're ending up in, but they want to sort of have a seamless access and across the ecosystem, especially in terms of their data and compute needs as they move through the different tiers of the compute and data spaces. We really do see that there's an advantage in trying to cluster, whether it be through missions or function, you know, and to then find it the efficiencies, but also the innovation to really push forward our NRI ecosystem to deliver the outcomes that it needs for this modern research practice.
Thanks, Bernadette. I'd like to change track slightly. For those that know me, I have a particular hobby horse about careers and support for our researchers that are actually driving a lot of these sophisticated capabilities. They often fall between the cracks in terms of promotion and career development and career advancement. It strikes me that this is an issue that in Australia, some organizations do it quite well, some don't do it very well, but it's certainly not uniform. And in my conversations with colleagues across Europe, I think you struggle with the same sorts of issues as they do in the US. We now have a very large and powerful community here with the European community, the Australian community. Are there things that we can do? Are there views that the panel might have? And I also invite any comments through the chat room about things that we might be able to do together to help improve career prospects, tenure, and development of our key staff that run a lot of these very sophisticated capabilities and platforms. Does anybody want to make a start? Dominik?
I can start, no problem. We have actually done quite a lot of work at the EU level on that in recent years. It is indeed an issue. It has been recognized already some time ago. We started trying to address it by developing kind of common practices for research infrastructure managers and operators, and also the possibility of staff exchange. Indeed, what we have done in the last years, also through EU-funded activities, was to set up a master's course, unofficially recognized 2-year master's course for research infrastructure managers and operators. That has been piloted at the University Milano Bicocca in Italy over the last years and is now expanding. So our objective was not only to organize a training that would actually, first of all, identify all the needs that you have as an RI manager and operator, because initially you usually had researchers that were kind of put into the shoes of RI managers because this was the RI on which they were working. But we recognize that there are a number of there's quite a broad set of skills that you need to run and operate an RI. But at the same time, developing such a course and recognizing this as a kind of a potential career path that can blend in with the research career also gives stronger opportunities for mobility of staff across research infrastructure. Now, the more general level, what we are trying to do is we are looking right now at how research careers are actually developing in Europe, and also how researchers are assessed. This is the work that is ongoing right now, also in the context of the work that we are doing on the renewed European research area, where we would like to open up these career possibilities so that all kinds of paths, be it going to industry and back, going to research infrastructures and back, having different types of episodes, would be properly taken into account as part of a researcher career, so that the research assessment and the way that the career is perceived is not only binary, focusing on world-class top-level publications, but takes into account the broader context and the broader work that researchers can and often do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything that you would like to add, Inmaculada?
Yes, if I may, from the S3 point of view, I want to mention also that we recognize that the research infrastructure has been hubs in order for training and formation of scientists, engineers, managers, but it has been done in an individual way, depending, and it's more related to the research infrastructure itself. There was not a well-structured process in which it is done. In the next period of S3, we recognizing that this is necessary, and to establish a better link with these policies in higher education, we have established what is called a stakeholder forum. A stakeholder forum in which we are inviting all those other stakeholders that can contribute, or we can contribute with them for the development of new action, new policies, new abilities, new skills for researchers and technologists. And in this sense, I would like to invite all of you to join us to the stakeholder forum in the webpage of S3. We are going to have our first stakeholder forum meeting during the S3 days in Ljubljana, and the intention is to open this possibility to better structure the collaboration with domains like the higher education. That is something that we have to promote. There are many actions that are already in place. There are Marie Curie actions that are put in place inside the research infrastructure in order to training and formation of researchers. There are exchange of staff. There are actions that are done inside the research infrastructure, but we want to improve it. We want to visibilize that. We want to see how we can offer the research infrastructure like a platform for this better involvement in higher education, formation and training.
Thank you. Bernadette, is there anything to add there? I will make one comment on one of the big values, I think, of the NCRIS process in Australia is it not only funds infrastructure, also funds people and gives people a sense of security and standing. So I think, Bernadette, that's something that I think the government to be congratulated on. But I just wondered if there's anything to add in terms of looking at recognising the gifted people that are driving these capabilities.
Oh, thanks, Ian. Yeah, we definitely appreciate the gifted people that are running these facilities, that's for sure. They're great advisors to government as well. But we are seeing, you know, the thing with our NCRIS facilities that the governance of them is different across the board, and we are seeing that there are, you know, many different players in the situation, including, you know, universities and you know, other companies and things like that. So it's not just one size fits all for the NCRIS facilities. So having a you know, one career sort of pathways is a bit difficult, but we're definitely seeing through this roadmap process and the consultation that people are really, you know, wanting to elevate the need and issue around career pathways for the technical support staff. And I really like Lisa's comments in the chat there about, you know, referring to people as platform scientists, and we're seeing that sort of terminology coming through the roadmap process as well. But I think it'll be interesting for us to look at the different levers, because there are so many players in this issue. It's not just one that can be affected only by government.
Thanks, Bernadette. One of the things I noticed, and it relates a little bit to what you were saying about the road mapping process, is looking at the chat line. It's something, Bernadette, I think that we've observed in Australia through the COVID crisis, just the spirit of collegiality, collaboration and openness has really come to the fore, and it's clear that this is happening in Europe as well. And the question in the chat line was, how do we build on this? How do we maintain it? Bernadette, you must have seen that come through in the interviews, just all that, how each different capability is contributing to this. There's a strong esprit de corps. How do we capture that? How do we build on that?
Well, I think we just we practice it every day. You know, we've you know been in contact with Dominik and his team there in S3, and we've got meetings with our UK colleagues and our Canadian colleagues next week. So I think all you do is you build into your own practice that, you know, that collaboration and reaching out and connecting with people. And if you do that, if everybody does that, then it builds a better outcome in the end. And I think we will continue to reach out to people across you know, the community in the roadmap process, and when we put out an exposure draft, we really welcome the contributions of others and other parties to help build a better vision for Australian research and innovation.
Any comments from you, Inmaculada or Dominik?
One comment maybe. I mean, I strongly support what Bernadette says in terms of cooperation and learning from each other. I think we can learn from each other in all kinds of directions, you know, across all countries, because we do certain things maybe similarly, some others we do a little bit differently, but also in some cases we go in the directions where the others don't. For example, what we have been struggling with in Europe a little bit, and that's because of the complex landscape that we have of the different actors, is the funding landscape for research infrastructure. So who actually funds what, where, at what level, what are the sources of that, and how much money it mobilizes in other ways. This is all connected to the question of the impact of research infrastructures and demonstrating that impact to the broader society and to the politicians that take decisions to fund research facilities. And for example, no, I noticed that Bernadette mentioned that you managed to calculate the return on kind of every dollar that you put in the research infrastructures in Australia over the last years. I would be, for example, really curious at a technical issue, how that is calculated. I would love to have that kind of figure actually for Europe, and I would like to understand how we can come up with it. So I think there are synergies in everything that we do, and we need to build on them. We can be collectively much wiser. Thank you.
I think if I may, that first we need to visualize what we are doing in each of the region, because sometimes we consider that everything is now outside of, for instance, in our case, outside of Europe, and it's not the case. We realize that we need to do, the exercise that RI-VIS is doing in order to offer what we have, because if we don't have this visibility, it is impossible to try to collaborate. Afterwards, there is this necessity to do different action in different level. I think that at the level of policymakers or ministers, it is very important to understand, and there is actions in the case of other regions, collaboration in other regions in which we are doing that, trying to find out how, for instance, the funding of these research infrastructure activities are done in the different countries in order to establish common approaches and see how we can collaborate and try to fund global infrastructures from different regions. It is also needed the individual contact, because we realized that through this individual contact, researchers versus researcher from Europe versus researcher in Australia, is how we can establish these links that can then evolve to the collaboration at the level, for instance, of the research infrastructure, or at the level of trying to have a membership of countries here in Europe with Australia, for instance. And I think that there is a lot still to do, and but we are in the best situation because all of us recognize that the global collaboration is needed. So the science is global, and the research infrastructure are tools in order to produce this excellent science, and research infrastructure need to be global also. So I think that the bases are there, and we have to establish the way we can collaborate in these different levels in order to improve and to strengthen the collaboration for the future.
Thank you. So one of the comments that's just come through on the chat line is the question of data sovereignty and sharing data, and it can be clinical data as well as research data. What do we see, and what do you think might be the issues in terms of building on the data repositories that we generate in Australia and across Europe, whether they be from registries, clinical trials, whether they be structural data? I guess EBI has a lot of that stuff covered in terms of the genomic and perhaps to a lesser degree proteomic data, but other data, how can we actually capitalize on that? How can we use it? How easy is it to share? It's a question I ask a little naively. I don't know whether any of our panels would have some expertise, or whether they've grappled with this across jurisdictions in Europe, and whether we can do more globally with the data and our increased capacity to handle data.
If I may, I think this is a big issue. This is a clear challenge for all of us. I think it is it has different approaches. There are communities, global communities. I can tell you, astronomy, that the community is well established, the data are interoperable, and they share the data with no problems. There are other communities, like all the communities that are related to clinical data, that they need to establish a good basis for doing that. We have realized during this crisis that we were not ready, ready for sharing this data. Still, we have a lot of problems, and for instance, for the construction of this COVID data platform, we have to work at national level to see how we can establish a means for sharing data, because the clinical data are personal data and it's not easy to do. There are now forced by the need to do it, that we are establishing the means, but there is still a lot to do. So this is a big issue that we have to work together and see how we can solve it. So we will see. We have to work on that. It's not easy. I think it is not completely solved.
Bernadette, can I ask you, you'll be obviously coming to terms with this at a national level. And we're a federated country, so there's even jurisdictional challenges in Australia. But I just wonder if there's any thinking coming out of the Australian government around data sharing, both nationally and in the context of today's meeting internationally.
Well, I'll let Kathy, if she's on the line, talk about the open science agenda that she's the chief scientist is driving. So that, I think sort of shows the support from the Australian government point of view of working towards open science agenda at its fullest. But we're definitely seeing, you know, data and data interoperability across the different types of data as one of the main issues in the roadmap. And I am absolutely no specialist, but we have been accessing and working through with specialists and in the fields to try and understand and grapple with what is the NRI implication of these issues and what are the key sort of actionables that the government should be taking forward.
Kathy, if it's okay with you, I wonder if you could give us a perspective. And hi, Kathy, long time no see.
So hi, yes, nice to see you, Ian. Look, I think it's really tricky, but I think you have to think of data as, there's a couple of things, first of all, that it's, you know, you've seen things on like the Economist saying data is the new oil, and so it's got value. But then it's also, I think, data is along a technology readiness level too, about where sort of data that is fundamental science data through to data that is clinical trials that can then lead to understandings, and then data that can lead to some value that enables people to earn income from it. You know, we just have to look at what's happening with social media and the data that we give for free of charge, and then others make a lot of money out of that in marketing and things like that. So I think there's a spectrum, and so that's the first thing. The second is that I think there's a need to go through and work out what are the principles and have a principled approach. But with open science, we've got the first thing we're doing at the moment is looking at how we can have open access of journals. That's the first step. And then the whole expectation then is making data that's being used to curate the research be made available. And we're seeing that beginning to happen, but it's only at a low level. And what we're seeing, though, is when data is made available to others, we're seeing a sort of a revisit of a new style of peer review where, for example, there was a paper looking at in Nature in 2018 claiming to have identified a physical concept called Majorana fermions, which people were saying if this was correct would be Nobel Prize winning stuff. Others went through and reanalyzed the data because it was made available and found that there had been some errors in the way the data was interpreted. So the paper was withdrawn and they've gone back to, you know, redo their work again. And this is the sort of thing which is also showing excellent science and the integrity we want to see improve. So how you actually get then that point of sharing across jurisdictions, I think, is dependent on where it is in that, I guess, for a clumsy way of describing it, technology readiness level or commercial usefulness of the data, and then also culture, rewards, recognition, interoperability of how you curate databases are all things that need to be worked through.
Thanks, Kathy. Dominik.
I may add just briefly. I think these are all important issues that were mentioned. Indeed, there are two challenges. One is the issue of potential competitive advantage, so the higher technology readiness levels. The other issue is the question of personal data protection and also of national security. So these are the three constraints that you have. European level, and with the clinical trial, when the clinical data, it's much more complex than for example the research data. Focusing on research data, it's a little bit easier. Our general approach is to have data as open as possible and as closed as necessary. In some areas, it is necessary to keep them closed because they are related to, for example, national security. In many areas, especially of more fundamental science, that relate also to the challenges that we face globally, like climate change, the only way forward is to actually share the data. Because like this, we can have better information and we can accelerate scientific progress. This has been in the focus of the work that we have been doing at the European level over the last years. We have managed to make a tremendous progress on open access to publications. We have been working also very strongly on open access to data. around the principles of fair data, so that actually the data can be used, verified, and reused by others in a way that is possible, simply because it is possible to understand the data, find it, and use it further. And this is also one of the underlying objectives that we have right now, developing the European Open Science Cloud, that should be a shared data space for European research. As I mentioned, for that research data at the European level, we would like to be really open so that we can share that and data can be used by everyone. In the international context, we are also pushing an open science agenda, an open data agenda, to the extent that this is possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominik. Inmaculada, anything you want to add to that? I think we've got a fairly comprehensive discussion. So look, having spent most of, in fact, all of my career in a classic research environment, I know researchers are driven by the dream and goal of Nature Cell science papers. That's their big outcome, highly cited, high impact papers. But of course, those that are funding into the research infrastructures are looking more at sort of socio-economic outcomes. So I guess my question would be, one is how we measure that, and perhaps more importantly, how do we promote that? How do we promote that? And I'm going to go to Bernadette, because she would be the one that'd be interested in hearing those sorts of outcomes, because for sustainability and continued investment, we have to show, true national value for these research infrastructures in terms of those kinds of benefits and impact. So Bernadette, what were the sort of things that I guess the government are looking at in terms of measuring the return on investment, not so much in terms of dollars, but more in terms of socio-economic impacts?
Thanks, Ian. I think just take a different angle. We definitely see that by linking our NRI to our government priorities, and we can see the value and impact in that way. We, through our program kind of data collection for the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy, which is the program that the money is administered through, we do collect data on how and what our NRI delivers on national priorities. And I think that's a really important one, because it helps make our messages very clear to government across the portfolios and in different forums, the actual direct impact. Because I think the issue with NRI is that it's not the scientists, right? It's not the research itself. It's an actual enabler of the research. So it's an indirect, it's an indirect sort of impact. And so we really do need to try and join the dots in terms of the impact of our NRI as an enabler of these outcomes and as an enabler of these big challenges and questions that governments and others are trying to face across the globe. So I don't have a magic theory. I think one of the NCRIS directors, Maren, might be able to speak to this, but they did just have Lateral Economics do an economic impact and return on investment study of our research infrastructures in Australia. So Maren might be able to brief the participants on that. But we definitely gauge return on investment in terms of dollar figures, but a lot of that is in-kind contribution, but we also see the link that is needed, that the NRIs support the government priorities of the day across Australian government portfolios, and they do that successfully, and we are able to use those stories then in our briefings and our interactions with other government and other ministers.
Thanks, Bernadette. And Maren, you thought you were just going to be an observer here.
Okay, perhaps I can add a few words.
Please.
Just to pick up on Bernadette's point, that we have recently completed a return on investment study across all of the Australian research infrastructure capabilities. And I think that might be of interest to our European colleagues. We're just in the process of briefing the Minister, and once that's done, we'll be able to make that report publicly available. But without going into details, which I probably can't at this stage, I could say that there have been two separate, actually a couple more than two, but two that come to mind, return on investment studies with Ausscope, Tim Rawling, who's here today, and from the Population Health Research Network, or PHRN, which I'm involved with. And both of those showed really positive return on investment in the order of sort of $1 returning up to $17 by looking across the impacts on GDP and, in our case, sort of the impacts, the contribution to health research, and then the economic benefits of that. And I know ROI studies can be challenging, but in fact we had a very well-recognised economist who's quite experienced in these matters, so we were somewhat reassured. And although I wouldn't recommend hanging too much on a particular figure, whether it's $10 return or 15 or whatever, I think the key message is that there are very significant returns on investment to societies, to countries, nations and societies from the investment in research infrastructure. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Dominik or Inmaculada, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
With pleasure. I think that the underlying principle of investing in research infrastructures needs to be excellent science, and the provision of cutting-edge services, so to break the frontiers, to push the frontiers of science, to make groundbreaking discoveries, and also to realize the dreams of scientists. I know these are all valid dreams that allow all of us to progress. Now, at the same time, of course, we are more and more concerned about the demonstrating and analyzing socioeconomic impact. But I think that we like to look at it in the broader scope. There are impacts that are quantifiable, there are more direct, but there are also impacts that are unquantifiable, there are indirect, they are intangible, and also they might be unintended initially. So what we have been experimenting with, for example, in recent few years at the European level, is the concept of impact pathways. We have developed different impact pathways for research infrastructures and try to develop also a methodology to help research infrastructures actually analyze those impacts and see where these impacts go. This is, I think, quite a promising concept because it enables us to capture both the quantifiable and unquantifiable impacts, as well as those tangible and intangible, but also intended and also recognize potentially the unintended ones. At the same time, over the last years, we have also put a lot of emphasis on socioeconomic impact. For example, within the process of the S3 roadmap, all new proposals that would like to become European priorities for investment since 2016, they need to come to us with an ex-ante analysis of potential socioeconomic impacts that they would have if they are realized as an investment and if they are implemented as a research infrastructure. It has also become an important component of our methodology to identify priorities, both at European but also at national level. Thank you. Well, maybe before one more sentence, there is still actually quite a long way to go because we still need to see what is the methodology behind the analysis of impact. We need to have some kind of a common agreement on which indicators we would use, what is important, and how we would do this, so that we can put the information better together.
Thanks, Dominik. Inmaculada.
I am going to talk about from my perspective of a national representative, from ministerial representative, not from S3, that was mentioned already by Dominik, that we request as S3 to incorporate in the proposal of the new project what is the socioeconomic impact that is expected from this infrastructure. But also at national level, this is something important. The number of research infrastructure are increasing in the last years. We have a limited budget that is not only the budget of the ministry, but also the budget of the institutions that are behind the different infrastructures. And we try to pool the resources in order to participate in the research infrastructures. And we have to establish some means to evaluate this socioeconomic impact in order, always considering that the main driver is the science, the excellent science, that this is no question about that. Afterwards, we need to evaluate also what is this socioeconomic impact expected in our case for Spain. And this is also because we are working together with the regions, the regions, and the regions are attached to the smart specialization strategies in which they have prioritized specific areas and domains in which they can work, and we can to be attached also to this in order to gather resources from the regions in the case of Spain. So before Spain support the proposal, for instance, in the case of a new roadmap, we evaluate at national level. We don't enter in the scientific case because the scientific case is going to be evaluated by ESFRI, and we follow the decision of ESFRI, but we evaluate this socioeconomic impact. In this sense, we measure what is the expected industrial return that we can expect from this infrastructure. We measure what is the level of involvement of institutions behind this proposal. We measure the level of users that are expected to use this infrastructure, and also the possibility, the visibility, or the possibility for Spain to play a main role in this infrastructure. For instance, hosting some of the sites, that it is the main way to have this socioeconomic impact in the region or in which this site is located. So there is no doubt. It's true that we have no a methodology. So we need to do it by evaluating the proposals. We ask them to give us in their national proposals all of this information, and there is a evaluation panel that, considering this, decide what are the best options for Spain in order to support the proposal for the new roadmap.
Thank you so much. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of the panel discussion. Before I formally thank everybody, I think it's important, and I don't know whether the organisers can do something about this, that with all of these sort of forums, there's so many great ideas, there's so many great thoughts and so many great initiatives. It's really important that we capture them and don't lose momentum. So if there's a mechanism, even by forming a couple of small working groups or something, just to sort of pursue some of these critical areas that have been raised that really sort of highlight the opportunity of Australia and Europe working more closely together. So look, I would like to thank particularly Dominik, Inmaculada and Bernadette for fantastic presentations, but also great and insightful comments and discussion. And for everybody else who's participated, the many great comments and thoughts that have come through the chat. So thank you all very much. It's been a terrific session. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. But if we could particularly thank our three panelists just by perhaps holding your hands in the air and just giving a clap for really an outstanding job. So thank you all very much. And I trust you all enjoy the rest of the session this evening and this morning, and the rest of the conference over the next couple of days or 3 days. So thank you all very much.